My plan is to do a brief history of the period to talk about dramatic comedy. I would like to introduce you to an essay. So if you write this down with a use of critics and an overview of the play. Hopefully by the end, you will feel very confident with the context. Now we're going to do a brief history of the period. So as you know, this is AO3. Okay, so underneath this, right, AO3, this is context, a brief history of this period. This is of vital importance because Shakespeare was writing at a time which was called the succession crisis. Okay, before we write anything down, actually, could you just write on your page, Shakespeare, the succession crisis? That was one thing that was going on. Another thing that was going on in the world was there was a break from Catholicism. Now, this is important. It really is. Okay, and if you understand this, you will have good context. Context is at the center of our discussions. We need to understand measure, of course, but actually we need to understand why it was written. The assessment objectives for measure are AO1, use of quotations, terminology, and accuracy of answering the task. So embedded quotations, use of terminology, and whether you can answer the task. AO2 is exploring the writer's craft. So we're going back to streetcar skills and referring to it as a play. This is not prose. AO3, you need context, and it needs to be thoughtful and embedded. You don't have comparison, no AO4, you have AO5, okay? Now this is a sense of argument and criticism, which is why you have a yellow booklet. Very important, you do not get to take the critics into the exam. You have to learn them. So that's really important. You take into the exam a blank copy of the text. Blank copy of Streetcar and a blank copy of Measure. Okay. Okay, so you take that into the exam. Any queries so far?
Okay.
Yes.
But if we're having exams, or are we? I'm still confused about this, about how.
It's highly likely you will have exams.
Wait, we will?
Yes.
But...
And then we will mark them.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're planning that in May they will set exams. They will give us set questions or a range of questions. We assess them, and some may go off the exam board and some will be marked by us. We're assuming that post Easter we'll be definitely on site and that you will have exams. There's, from what Gavin Williamson is suggesting, the only difference is that they'll be teacher assessed and they'll be slightly lenient on the marking. Olivia, your query.
When quoting critics, last year and first year,
Hold that thought. I'll teach you. Don't worry. I'll promise.
Okay.
So I'll deal with that. Good. Okay. So those are our 4 assessment objectives. Now let's go back up. So this is, actually you probably need to understand religion first. Okay. Through history, since the beginning, so you've got kind of BC, all right? So you've got Judaism. Let's go back very quickly. And then Jesus. Okay, we're all happy that Jesus was a Jew, carpenter. Okay, then there's Jesus, and it created a Christ savior following church. And for some 100 years, they called themselves followers of the way. And over history, I can't remember the exact dates, it became called Christian, okay? And then, I don't know the exact I should look it up, but anyway, the Catholic Church was formed. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, there was only the Catholic Church, and it was Latinate, ruled from Rome by the Pope. Okay, and you'd be Pope until you died. So you basically had a papal church. And you had the Catholic Church. That was the one church. Okay, there was a break in the East. Let's move. So there's like an Eastern Orthodox that broke off. And then what happened was suddenly around the time that Henry VIII was on the throne, in the 1400s, until 1400s, when in Europe, called Luther, not Martin Luther, actually the original Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Luther, and a guy called Zwingli, and others began to question. This is important when you do Chaucer. I promise this is important, okay? Because this is massively important when you do Chaucer, which is the text you will do in your second year, okay? So it's really important you understand this. It feels a little bit like we're going a bit far back, but this is of vital importance for Chaucer. So that's why I'm doing this. They began to question the power and wealth of the Catholic Church. For a religion that claimed you should be humble and that was based upon a working class carpenter going around and identifying with nobodies, the Catholic Church had lost its way. It had wealth, status, gold. The leaders of the church at the time were married with multiple wives and unbelievable power and wealth. And in Europe, a lot of people started to read the Bible in their own languages. Very important for Chaucer. Note this down. You can write this. There was someone called Lollard. Wycliffe, excuse me, John Wycliffe, whose followers were called Lollards. Okay. He translated the Bible into English and said that it did not encourage inequality. He said that actually it didn't suggest that women were necessarily inferior, and it didn't suggest you could be wealthy, and it didn't suggest you should seek power. These were radical times. Martin Luther and Zwingli and, oh gosh, the name escapes me, others were reading the Bible not in Latin but in their own languages and saying, hang on a second, how is this powerful, unbelievably wealthy Catholic Church what the Bible intended? The New Testament, okay? The new stories. And so this was a time of huge questioning. People started to criticize. Why was it so powerful? Why was it so moneyed? Why all the gold in the churches? Why all the inequality? And they also did other things like they sold indulgences, and there was lots of other pretty immoral stuff going on. So Martin Luther became a Protestant protester. Okay, literally protest. As a protest, these were protests against the status quo, against the power of the Catholic Church. And they formed their own churches, what we now call the Protestant Church. So you had Catholic and Protestant protesters. And Protestants felt that you should be humble, not seek after wealth, simple life, and live by the Bible. And this was a huge challenge. The power of the Catholic Church was inestimable and went hand in hand with the Holy Roman Empire of the time. So this was a huge shake-up in the Western world. This was massive. The very ruling elite questioned. Is everyone with me so far? Feel free to raise your hand if you are struggling. Does this all make sense? Good. Okay. Now, this was going on in Europe. Zwingli, Luther, these challenges to the power of the Catholic Church, and these Protestants, they used to do stuff like pin notices in the public towns. You could be killed for this. I mean, seriously, you could be killed for this. Willing to lay down their lives for something they believed in. And from the Protestant Church, you got, for example, Baptists, Methodists, etc., that you now have. And of course, the church in Wales, church in England, etc. So that was all happening in Europe. There was a big Protestant movement. Now let's come to England at the time. So that was all in Europe, just right on there, all in Europe so far. Now we come across to little old Tudor England. Now we come to Henry VIII. Henry VIII was Catholic. So I'm leaving this up and you can write down key things, and I will leave this up so you can write down some of these things and add to them. So leave space between each thing. Henry VIII was on the throne and he was married to Catherine of Aragon. She was Catholic. Oh, she was Catholic. I think isn't Aragon in Italy? Spanish, my apologies, of course. Oh, yes. So she was, this is testing my A-level history from many years ago. I think she was something like she was brother of the King of Spain. We'll definitely need to check that. Any of you doing early modern history?
No, but I do know that she was Henry VIII's brother's wife, and when he died, she married him.
Yes, so she was older than Henry, and she had been married to Henry's brother. Now, Henry was, I think, a late teenager. He married this older woman, and it seems that in the early years of their marriage, they were in love. They were both Catholic because everyone was at that point. They were Catholic. They were ruled by the Pope. Okay, so the Pope ruled from Italy, and everyone in Europe was Catholic. Everyone read the Bible in Latin. No one read it in their own language, and this was the church at the time. Now, some years went on, and Catherine had a girl child. Now, I'm sure you know this, but back in the day, girls couldn't inherit. In fact, until William and Catherine, literally a few years ago, had a child, it would always have just gone to the next male heir. They changed it, and it took until like what, the 2020 somethings, the 2010s, I think it was, whenever the first child was born. So throughout history, you had to have a son. You had to have a son to be king. Now hold that thought, it's important for later. Write that on your page, it's massive. So Henry and Catherine, happy? They have a child, Mary. Have a child, Mary, all good. But as the years go on, there's no male child. And Mary's knocking 40. No male child. Who will carry on Henry's name? And it's her fault, clearly. You know, she's not producing the male. She is not doing her job. You married women after war. You married women because they were objects to be used to bear you male children. Obviously. I mean, what else are they there for? She's not doing her job. Henry starts to think. He's not happy. He hasn't got a male child. She's nearly 40. The time's going to be up. He's not got a male child. He also had various affairs. Obviously, kings did. Obviously, king. Any woman he wanted, obviously. I mean, that was just completely without question. He's a male. He's king. As if you'd question it. But there was this girl who was really annoying, and she just wouldn't let him have it. Anne Boleyn. And he really wanted her. He really wanted her, but she wouldn't become his mistress. He was getting sick of Catherine, and she was very, very Spanish, very Catholic. Henry looked over at Europe, at the Protestant Reformation. Oh, hang on a second. If I wasn't ruled over by the Pope, if my religion wasn't papal authority, I could make my own religion. I could divorce the old cow. Zwingli's done it. Luther's done it. I really want to divorce Catherine. And I'm pretty sure it was always claimed that she and his brother hadn't had sex. But now he's like, well, the reason why she's not bearing male children is she's clearly cursed because she had sex with my brother. I'm committing incest. I need a divorce. I'm going to make my own religion. I should do horrible history, shouldn't I? And Henry thought, okay, I really need to divorce this old cow. And so he broke from Rome. And he decided he was going to join this, yay, I'll be a Protestant. Church in England. Church in England, it was called. Write that down your page. He basically saw what was going on in Europe and that there was this Protestant and thought, okay, I'll have my own religion. I will call it the Church in England. And he quickly interposed the Church in England, divorced Catherine, like goodbye, and her daughter Mary then like, girl child, marries Anne, gets the sex, essentially. So makes your own religion, gets the sex. I'm king, of course. And he becomes God's authority on earth. Isn't that nice? No more Pope. No, 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 no. I am God's representative on earth. Okay, that's nice, isn't it? To basically deify yourself, almost. So Henry VIII saw this as an opportunity. He married Anne. Anne then has, oh, for crying out loud, another girl child, Elizabeth. He's now got his own religion, Anglican, Angles, English religion, yeah? Anglican. Write that on your page if you didn't know. Anglican. Okay, girl child, schmo child. It very quickly went sour. And there's very little evidence, but he accused Anne of various things. And if you know the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Did you know that? This is his wives. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So we now know. Bye, Anne. Waiting in the Wings, Jane Seymour was organised. One of his ladies in waiting, as I remember. Jane Seymour. And Jane, in 1547, I think it was, I'd have to check the date, gave birth to the son. The much wanted legitimate, i.e. in marriage, because he'd actually had other kids like Fitzroy. He had a son by one of his mistresses called Fitzroy, which means royal. Fitz is a royal name. But he couldn't make him king because he was born out of wedlock. But finally, he has a son in marriage. And Jane died like 12 days after birth of an infection. And he forevermore saw her as his real wife. He has a son. Get in. Yeah.
It was 1537.
37. I was 10 years out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because 47 is the year Henry died, I think.
Oh, yes, it was. Thank you very much. Is that on my screen? Because I'm looking at you guys.
It is.
Sorry. Good. He then marries Anna Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. I'm going to scoot by them because we've done the important bit. I'm sure they were very important women. Okay. Actually, Catherine Parr was quite a radicalist. Moving swiftly on. So he had the Anglican Church. So until this point, he had made his own church in England. And then Henry, fat, unattractive, and really hideous looking, died. And his son, Edward, the male child, inherited. He continued to be Protestant, okay? But he was really sickly. He was 9 when he inherited. And as you can see, he was only around for 6 years. He died. And then hang on a second. Mary, look, issue means children, by the way. Mary is the daughter of her unbelievably Catholic mother. Okay? Mary. So you suddenly had Mary rapidly attempting to move the entire of England back to Catholic. Reinstates the priests, not the new church in England vicars. Back to Latin. The poor people in England were like, it's like a game of tennis. Catholic, Anglican, Catholic, Anglican, Catholic, Anglican. And everyone's like, what should I be praying in? Should I be praying in Latin or should I be praying in English? Like, okay, it's Latin. Oh, no, it's English. Oh, no, it's Latin. Are we Catholic? Are we Catholic this week or Protestant this week? Are we Catholic or Anglican? Catholic or Anglican? Catholic or Anglican? Catholic. You do it, I'll do tic-tac-toe, yeah? We'll do thumb war over it, shall we? This would be more sensible. Poor, and there was no like, you know, social media. It wasn't like government briefings of today. We would quite like to open schools from Monday and have mass testing organised by then, please. Oh no, maybe not Monday. We would like to open them by Wednesday and you have mass testing, please, from Gavin Williamson at 12 o'clock on the last day of term. Okay, no. Actually, we would like schools open. We are going to threaten you with a legal action unless you open schools. Oh, actually, no. The next day we would like schools closed, please. It's the same, isn't it? It's that crazy. Yeah, time to catch up. So, these were crazy times for the ordinary folk. Mary came along. She desperately tried to make the country Catholic again, pretty angrily, actually. And there was a lot of kind of killing and difficulty and bloodshed. Say again, Charlie?
I just went just a little bit. She's not Bloody Mary for nothing.
Exactly, one of her nicknames was Bloody Mary. Good. And then we had, hang on a second, Mary died. Oh, good Lord. Because what happened was there were no other men at that point who could inherit, so it went to women. Elizabeth I, we've probably all heard of her because she ruled for actually a decent length of time. So everyone could be like, okay, so she's Anglican and she really establishes the church in England. Kind of embeds the Church of England.
Vicky,
And yes.
didn't Elizabeth kill Mary?
Mm,
I swear there's a film on
no.
it. No.
Oh, that's Mary Queen of Scots.
Oh. Okay.
Yes, that was Mary
Never
Queen
mind.
of Scots. She tried to take over the throne, but yes,
Okay.
Mary did put her in the tower and behead her, as I remember. But can't remember. I'd have to check on the dates. And Elizabeth was known as the Virgin Queen. Okay. By the way, when Mary was on the throne, lots of people tried to pressure her to kill Elizabeth, but she didn't. even though they did not like each other and for different mothers. They did imprison each other, and she did imprison Elizabeth in the Tower of London, though. But she was known as the Virgin Queen, i.e. she didn't marry. And she used this to brilliant effect, okay? Now, you're a queen of England, and the rest of Europe would quite like to invade you. Not in that way, you rude folk. Although that too, actually. So they actually wanted to invade, okay? And also, all the men were like, okay, so she's quite wealthy, feisty. I'd just like to take her down a peg or two and own her land. Now, she's a ruler. She's massively powerful. And everyone was like, okay. So all the men came a-wooing France. From France. And Spain and Italy and loads of people tried to woo her, but she wasn't having any of it. She suggested she might marry them, but she never did. Fabulous. Very, very, very feisty. Extraordinary. And meanwhile, there was some other stuff, like she tried, navigated the globe and sent out lots of excursions. This is also the Renaissance. Let's talk about that for a second. Okay, this is also the Renaissance. Now, Renaissance means rebirth. This is also going on at the time, at a time of great change, at a time of great challenge. Often there is also huge excitement in culture. This was going on. There was a huge change in culture, and this was exciting. People went back to Greek plays, to poetry, to art, past, and reinvented new things. Now, just so you know, it's only very recently in history we have valued new stuff. Until very recently, art was art of any kind. I mean, music, art, plays, etc., was reinventing what had gone before. That was considered great art, revisiting what you had from the past. Okay. Elizabeth reigned. She was a Protestant. And then Shakespeare was born. All right. Shakespeare. Little old Will Shakespeare in Stratford-upon-Avon, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. William Shakespeare was born, we think, around 1564. Oh no, we do know that because he was born, and then he died in 1616. So he spans two monarchs. He goes from under Elizabethan times, Elizabethan, to Jacobean, which is what they called James. So there's this Renaissance in the middle. I love this. This is so fun. You're like, okay, it's okay. It's all right. We're hanging in there. We're getting a little bit bored. We'd quite like to play a game of tennis now, if it wasn't so cold and grey outside. Renaissance. And Elizabeth, towards the end of her reign, there was a huge fear. She didn't have any kids, and there were no more siblings. Mary was dead. Edward's dead. Who is going to take over the throne? Okay, so across your page, if you could add in, let me move everything down. There was a massive fear. Who was going to take the throne? And this could be war. This really seriously could be an invasion. France, Italy, Spain, the families of Europe were very powerful. And Elizabeth, for all of her travelling and for all of her culture and for all of the religion that she had kind of started to create across England, it could all be whipped away in an instant by an invader from Europe. This was a terrifying time. Terrifying. Language could be taken away. This was called the succession crisis. Elizabeth was so frightened about this. She made it illegal to mention it. You could be killed if you talked about it. This is of key importance in Measure for Measure. Elizabeth died. No husband, no children. And then suddenly, she decided, before death, to give the throne to James, King James VI of Scotland. He was already a king. He'd already been King of Scotland. He was James VI of Scotland. And he rode down from Scotland through England to London, to the city walls, and he rode into London and proclaimed himself king, and he became James I of England. And he united Scotland and England for the first time. And since 1603, and possibly not much longer, England and Scotland were united. They had always been separate countries until that point. There was a huge crisis point, and James rides through England to London to unite a very troubled two countries at a very troubled point in history. James I was a Protestant, same as Elizabeth, okay? The same. But he was aware, he didn't mind some of the Catholic traditions. He didn't mind some of the Catholic traditions, and he wasn't willing to be violent, to make people Protestant. He wanted to rule, he wanted to find a middle way between, oh my goodness, the warring factions of all the landowners. He wanted to find a way middle, via media, a middle way between Catholic, Protestant, between the warring factions, this aristocratic class. And in the early years of his reign, I mean, if we think about the Gunpowder Plot, they literally tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. There were multiple attempts upon his life. He was really trying to find unity, but in a lot of turmoil. They'd been fighting over the estate for Elizabeth. There was fighting over power by all the male landowners who wanted to marry her. There was a huge rift between the Catholic and the Protestant factions. And he wants to find a middle way. A middle way. And this is what Shakespeare's Measure for Measure is about. Balance. Measure for measure. And this is of key importance in the play. Now, I want to draw on your page. Oh, no, not in green. Let me just do that again. Measure for measure. Now, in the olden days, you would put a weight on one side and something else on the other, and you would then find balance. Measure for measure. This is a play about the need for balance. A play about the warning if you don't have this balance. The need for balance, the need for unity, and a warning against disunity. It's a warning against disunity. It's a warning when you don't have balance. And actually, it's a warning that you need judgment and mercy. Mercy is undeserved favour. I'm trying to make me do the American spelling, okay? You need, yes, you need to be judge. Yes, you need to be ruler. But you should also be merciful. The other thing about James was he wrote a book for his son about how to be a good ruler. And he said, you should be humble. You should get to know your people. So he was quite an interesting character, actually, James. This sets the scene. Let's review briefly. Terrifying times. Protestant, you've learnt, and Catholic. Via media, rulers. What else have we looked at? We've looked briefly at power of the church. So this is set in Vienna, okay? Catholic Vienna. I'll come back to this later, but for the moment, just have a listen.
Out of the blue, the Duke of Vienna decides to leave the city, putting his dukedom in the hands of his deputy, Angelo.
The angel. Angelo, an angel, okay? The king steps aside and puts an angel as ruler.
He gives Angelo his absolute moral authority, including the power of life and death over his subjects. The puritanical Angelo immediately starts to clean up Vienna, pulling down all the brothels and reinstituting laws against promiscuity, including the death sentence for sex outside marriage. The first to be arrested is young Claudio, whose girlfriend Juliet is pregnant with their child. As he's dragged to prison, he begs his friend to go to his sister, Isabella, to ask her to intervene on his behalf. Isabella is about to take holy orders as a nun and enter a convent. Nevertheless, she's persuaded to go to Angelo and appeal to him. Angelo initially refuses her pleas to lift the death sentence on poor Claudio. However, he finds himself moved by the vehemence of her argument and realizes that he's attracted by both her modesty and her beauty. And he proposes that he will indeed save her brother's life, but only on condition that she sleeps with him. Isabella is horrified and threatens to expose him. He tells her nobody would believe her, and she turns to us and asks, to whom shall I complain? How can she sacrifice her virginity and her immortal soul to redeem her brother? And what guarantee does she have that Angelo will keep his word if she were to relent? The Duke, meanwhile, disguised as a friar, has remained in Vienna to spy secretly on his deputy and see how he uses or abuses his new power. He has himself secretly placed in the prison to overhear Isabella tell her brother of Angelo's proposal. With the clock ticking towards the proposed execution, the Duke has a dangerous plan to resolve the situation, save Claudio's life and her virginity, and ultimately expose the hypocrisy of his sainted deputy.
The most important scenes of the play, if you just write them on your page, Act 2, Scene 2, Act 2, Scene 4, Act 2. So when you do 2-2, you go 2.2. When you write play lines, if you didn't learn this at GCSE, that's fine. When you write out lines for a play, you put the act, then the scene, then the lines. So you could do 2.2, that's Act 2, Scene 2. The other important one is Act 2, Scene 4, and Act 5 is of key importance. Lucio means light. Write that on your page. Lucio means light. He means lightness. Now I mean lightness as in two things. He's funny, but he also is sexually light. Means not he's quite free. Okay, Lucio meaning light, and to be light is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. If you said their lightness, it's not good. It's not nice. Okay. And I think that's all we need. Now, let's set the scene. Let's set the scene. Angelo seems so perfect, so pure. He's actually on an extreme. So if you go back to your notes about Catholic and Protestant, so whichever way they were, so if Catholic was on this side of your page and Protestant was on this side, way out past Protestant, a particular branch of them were called the Puritans. So write that on your page, past Protestantism, past Protestant, so you're Catholic or Protestant, way past Protestantism, there were the Puritans. They dressed in black, they wanted everything pure, and they generally didn't like much fun. Angelo is a Puritan. He seems completely consistent. He's never sinned. He's never done anything bad. He knows the law absolutely clearly. He's spent his life studying the law, and he seems completely angelic. He seems completely angelic, an angel. The Duke has stepped aside, the King has stepped aside and asked Angelo, sainted, he's described as sainted deputy, to step into his place. So Angelo is now the ruler. Perfect, right? Perfect. An angel as a ruler. He's going to be perfect, isn't he? Isabella is another girl, the girl we're about to meet. Isabella is the girl we're about to meet. Clearly an angel. There was a coin at the time that was the arcane, an angel fighting, and this is clearly the Angelus coin. He's perfect. He knows the law. He's called straight in justice. They actually call him the sainted deputy, or outward sainted deputy. The Duke has stepped aside, and Angelo is now the ruler. There are hints, though. He's not what he seems. Shakespeare's time. They all thought the Puritans were hypocrites, right? I mean, come on. They're just so holier than thou. They don't have any fun. They don't believe in sex, or they don't really want to have sex. They don't seem to have any vices. Hypocrites, surely, right? Then over here we have Claudio and her brother, Claudio and his sister, Isabella. The issue is that Claudio's girlfriend is pregnant. And Angelo, as soon as he gets power, enacts all the old laws, including the one that says, if you have sex outside marriage, you can be killed. Angel, bringing justice, bringing law, bringing the rule. Bit extreme. Do you remember it was supposed to be a measure for measure? But Angelo, no. He's like, right, let's get rid of all moral immorality. All immorality. I'm not immoral. I have never bowed to him. He's never been bad. And Claudio's girlfriend is pregnant. So Claudio's going to die. Isabella, we've just met her, and she was about to enter a convent, i.e. she's not willing to be married, and she loves God. She's not willing to be married. She loves God. She's pure. She's pure and good and holy and Catholic. Okay? Isabella. Claudio and his sister Isabella. Claudio's girlfriend is pregnant. Isabella is about to leave society and go into a convent and live a holy life. And Lucio comes to her and goes, oh, Isabella! You have to come and speak to the new sainted deputy Angelo, because your brother's about to die. And Isabella decides to go and meet Angelo to try and persuade him to save Claudio.